What if AI didn't just respond to queries and prompts and requests? What if it quietly worked behind the scenes, organizing your digital life, managing routine tasks, and giving you back the one thing that you never have enough of? Time. That's exactly what Martin Warner believes is coming.
The idea is, how does Martin replicate himself 10 times? Right? That means I'm getting 1,000% productivity.
Martin is the founder and CEO of warpspeed, a company based on a very simple, ambitious, powerful idea. What if instead of having dozens of AI tools, chatbots, organizational tools, you had one single assistant that actually learned the way that you work and adapted to you? In this conversation, we're going to look at why today's AI tools still create too much friction and too much work for you and still don't come up with the right answers. The answer is really because they don't know you. You've got to tell them everything about what you're doing and what you're thinking. warpspeed is trying to create a product that actually looks at all your work, all your emails, how you write, how you think, what's important to you, and simplifies all of that. So if you've ever wondered what comes after ChatGPT, and can AI actually make your life easier and better, give you some time back in your day, I think you're going to really enjoy this conversation. Let's get into it. I'm Peter Horan, host of Trending Forward. I'm here with my friend and partner, Dan Gall, and Martin Warner of warpspeed. And I've really been looking forward to this conversation. We heard about warpspeed, and it promises to use AI to help us all get better organized, get through our days quicker and with less stress. And so we're going to talk to Martin today about warpspeed and how we can best use it. But I want to start by asking Martin a little bit about his background, because, it first came in as, oh, it's warpspeed and Martin's CEO. But then as I dug in, it's like, oh, wait, he's like the most interesting man in the world. If it keeps going. So if I understand correctly, you're certainly one of Britain's leading entrepreneurs and coach for entrepreneurs, but you're also like in the movie business. So tell us a little bit about your background, Martin.
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on your show. So I'm a bit of a meanderer, and I guess the question's always been, am I interested in the analysis, or am I interested in kind of just making a product work? And what happened in the early days is I built a career between finance and technology, but as a kid, I was fascinated by the movie business. So I decided to write scripts and do crazy things in the early days to try and find a foothold in that industry. Many years later, I managed to get a foothold in it, but by then I'd already established a career in finance and technology. And so when I look at my life, I think, well, really, it's film, it's entrepreneurship, and understanding kind of the perils of entrepreneurship, but also the fun that can come and the enrichment from being part of entrepreneurship. And then this invention side of me, which really took hold, where I've invented a lot of things. I can't say they've all been home runs, but I'm a person that wants to build something and validate it really fast. And those are the if you will, the behaviors that have stayed consistent with me throughout the years. And I have, I mean, so the UK likes to, particularly the press, like to throw around these titles of, being a celebrated entrepreneur and whatever, and breaking a few records, but it doesn't really make much difference in this world. You're only as good as the last product that you've built. But I have, been around technology for a long time, pre-internet, and I've had a bunch of different startups. I've had a foray into the hardware arena with the 3D printing world, and we did have a big success there. And I'm not sure that, well, it became the subject of a book I wrote. I'm not sure I'd go and do it again, but and I'm not sure I could even replicate it. But I had a number of good experiences there, not least of all understanding how tricky it is to use software with hardware, and then to control the brain through a BIOS. And this kind of axiom is very, very tricky. So tricky that I'm not that interested in hardware anymore. And then among other things, I've been driven by other passions like urban air mobility and drones and stuff like that. And I have two ventures, one focused on parcel drones, or the ability to create an autonomous workflow that lets us put up many, many drones and deliver parcels to people's houses. And I think I'm still the only person with the patent that has understood random autonomous routes. And I don't want to digress, but I'll give you 10 seconds because that is fascinating. And a conversation maybe for the day. But But the concept is that helicopters and planes fly on tracks, even when they go, as I live between London and New York, we fly, even without cell towers, we fly on predictable tracks for a number of reasons, not least of all for pilot updates, for turbulence and stuff like that. And so the idea is, what happens when someone uses Amazon and they live in, I'm in New Jersey at the moment, but let's say New York or California, it doesn't matter, and they order something at a point in the day next to their neighbor who also orders something that's different in size. It's 10 minutes later and there are two drones flying. Does it carry it together when there's a maximum payload? What happens now when you exaggerate that or maximize it to hundreds of thousands of deliveries under 8 pounds in payload, let's say, that are going to be delivered through the skies, or let's say the tri-state area of New York and the surrounding areas? This is a very complicated pattern and an algorithm that has to create a virtual flight envelope. It has to understand the areas it cannot fly, like airports, so LAX or LaGuardia or whatever. And then it has to understand weather. And if you were to actually look at the end of the day and say, what were all the flight routes that a drone took from its departure point to where it delivered, it would look like a Jackson Pollock painting. No flight route would look the same. It would look like I took a marker and I didn't stop scribbling over the page. That's random autonomous routes. And actually, it's not random. So I was very proud after figuring this out as a pattern. And I believe it underpins the ability to scale drones. So an idea of kind of the way I think about an analysis. The other one was, when I went down this path, I thought, well, passengers had the same challenges. Perhaps we'll use tracks more, but we still have the same urban challenges. And that got me into passenger aviation. And that's been a thrill and also a curse. And so, I'm driven by.
Back that for a second. Tell me about you said passenger aviation. I understand parcels, but tell me about passengers. What are you thinking?
Yeah, so I have a research venture called Autonomous Flight, and I was the first British gentleman, for want of a better word, to enter the race. And what we did, well, first of all, was built an understanding of what would a battery or lithium powered aircraft look like. What would be the composite materials? Because it's all about weight. How would we balance that in a new flight application? So there's nothing new like music to learn about music or flying. Flying is understood, but the application of flying is something that we can play with. So we can use fans, turbofans, motors, all these different things, and we can put them in different configurations. Ours is, we call it a lobster. It's got these claws, which are the fans, and it's got this tail, correct?
Hang on. Slow down. Talk about a lobster. It's like,
Right. So
I'm not understanding the lobster.
yeah, so the architecture or the airframe, if you will, and the motors, we call it a Y frame. So if you look at it, if you were looking down at it, it would look like a Y. So if you were to flatten those out to a 180 degree, they would have motors on them. And then the back is the fuselage. It also has the cabin, and then it has the batteries underneath, and then it has another fan at the end, or motor, whatever one. Let's call it a motor fan. And it looks a little bit, because of the tail, it looks like a lobster. And so we do the lobster flight. So, and many of these different players are out there, obviously happy to promote some competitors, but Archer Aviation, Joby, all these guys are out there. And it's a challenging world, because now we need to think about flying in a different way. So with this incredible heat that we're getting now, but also these horrible temperatures in the winter, particularly up north, we have to think about temperature and weather casing for batteries. We have to think about different types of redundancy. So when things happen, what do we do? The reason that flying is so safe is we start with a zero-sum game for flight redundancy, right? So they are really, really safe when they're in the air. But these things are built to flex. If the autopilot goes down, they spin up another autopilot. There's 3 flight management systems. There's a lot of redundancy. We have to do the same in electric aviation. So passenger aviation, I should have perhaps said electric aviation. That would have immediately centered the focus on the fact that we're using batteries, which means short range. It means they're going to fly at 100, 120 knots, maybe a bit faster. Some of the competitors claim that they'll go from, Sacramento to Lake Tahoe to Las Vegas. My view is that the success of this complement to travel will be alongside buses, coaches, trains, cars. And it will be really to think of short tracks that exist in the greater area of, say, Los Angeles. So how do you get between LAX? How do you get up to Burbank, et cetera, et cetera? And what are these other highly trafficked areas where we'd want to put people in the air? I think this is the argument for this kind of aircraft. It's not a long-range aircraft, but the efficiencies and the cost are significant. I mean, they're 30-40% the cost of a twin-engine helicopter, and they're probably about 70 or 80% more energy efficient and better for the environment. Those two things are driving this whole your journey into electric aviation.
Yeah. Having spent hours on M4, London is also a candidate.
Sorry?
I said, having spent hours on the M4, I'd nominate London as well.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. No, for sure. You know, the biggest candidates are flat cities. The topography of skyscraper cities is the challenge. And it's ironically the same challenge as a bike and a motorbike as it is for parcels and people. So if we can't get the drone down because we're in the center of New York, we've got to go to a flat service, probably on the East or Hudson River, in order to be almost like a PO box, and then you have to go and pick them up. So we have a similar challenge in as much that if the topography dramatically changes, then we have to account for that as well.
I've been waiting for passenger aviation, single or double passenger aviation for years when the first prototypes started coming out and the excitement. Because for me, I hate sitting in traffic. So the dream, it's ever since our childhood and seeing it in cartoons, I want that. I don't want to drive a car in that sense. I love driving cars, but I want to drive cars in a thrilling way, and I want to commute in a boring way, right? Like, and to me, passenger aviation is way more along my route or what I would be interested in versus sitting in traffic in a car.
How many different projects are you involved in right now, Martin? On any given day, how many things?
Yeah, so it's interesting because a bunch of the people that are similar to me kind of answer this question in two ways. They either say to themselves, well, I'm not active in everything. Or the other one is they say, oh, I divide my week up. And actually, there is only one answer, and that's a division of labor. So what I do every month is I look at what are the upcoming milestones that I've got to hit and where have I got to put my priorities. So warp speed gains all my time because of the speed it's moving at. Fortunately, uh, in order to grow these research ventures where a lot of it is capital that I'm employing, I rely on the teams in order to go and do particular research milestones. And that allows me to play what I call, for want of a better word, a governing and review role in the process. So I'd like to say that I don't put my name as CEO on everything or claim that I'm architecting every single thing, because that would be a flat out lie. And when I see certain guys like that doing that or wanting that attention, I think it draws different focus on what you actually are really doing. And so in the beginning, there was me that drew the plane, or for want of a better word, an architect's drawing. I'm quite handy with images. And then I started to say, well, hang on, this is just a picture. Now, what is the underlying research? There was no context. There was no AI at that time. I'm using AI in a sense that you wouldn't understand today back then. But when I started, which was getting on for 9 years ago, I had to go away and do that research. When I was ready and I had enough research, we built a prototype and I started hiring a team. At that point, my role shifted. As for being a serial entrepreneur, I think it comes with a lot of challenges, and I caution all the people that have gone through my program. We're over 460,000 now. That is, by the way, over 22 years, 23 years, I should say. And I say that it's not for the faint-hearted, and also you need a lot of capital, you need patience, and you need to be 2 or 3 orders of magnitude along the runway. So you need to have velocity behind your ideas. Otherwise, people catch up. You lose your capital, and you really don't get to fulfill the ideas that you originally had. So there are certain things you can do to divide your time and playing these fields, but they're not all going to run at the same pace, and that's the challenge. By the way, that's the inventor's syndrome. Is as much that they can come up with ideas, they can prove concepts, but they don't all make it. Fortunately, I can add capital, but then you still got many more critical milestones to get to the market. Urban air mobility, as this area is called, the passenger or electric aviation, is still looking for final approval. We're getting on for our 10th year. It's a long range pursuit.
Long game.
Yeah.
So tell me about warp speed. First of all, where'd the idea come from, and sort of define warp speed? What is warp speed?
Yeah, so let me start with the question of where did it come from. So the idea of personalization has always has always fascinated me, that how do systems and technology know us? And that gets to kind of a whole story of AI, but just in its general sense, how do how do I use something that's not just fun? And now today, particularly with privacy, how do I trust it? And how does it really do the best job for me? In the old days, it was always programmatically. We had to look at the data, we had to ingest new data that I put in, and it would give me some kind of structured answer back. I always felt that humans didn't operate like that those tools were way too rigid, and therefore we could never really become overly productive. They were great at scale, they were great in data systems, they were great through the big data era for industries, but that's not what we do day to day. And so personal productivity is an area that I've spent, I don't know, 2 decades on. I spent a considerable amount of time looking at AI. Obviously, when at the end of 2022, when GPT put out there if you will, the summation of what arrived at context, the light bulb went on, and I thought, let me just go and pick up my research and some of the things that I'd done. I already had a very fixed view. I didn't have the name warp speed, but I did have a very fixed view that the one-stop shop has come home, and it's going to stay for a while. You know, this idea that there is all these different software products, and then all of a sudden it all came into one place. We've seen it in every part of technology. The last one that most people think of is the single sign-on that always failed, right? We are one email and you get into everything, right? And so I looked at that and thought, well, my God, what could we do now? Can we get past some of these issues? So the concept was, we want to make people productive, and we'd be happy with micro efficiencies, because day to day when you use these tools, you're not saving 2 weeks worth of time. But I can tell you in the next few months, you'll be saving months of time through agents and other things that are happening. So this is changing. But the simple idea was, how do we take all the technology know-how out of your hands? So you don't have to think about all these different tools. You don't have to think about the underlying power user technologies. So OpenClaw is an example, to give an example, or to give you an idea of how to link things up and connect the right tools and use agents. This is, for 90% of the population, even 95%, not going to happen for the everyday user. So we said technology is irrelevant. The second thing we said was, well, all these tools need to behave in a way or in a manner that is symbiotic to each other. So email, and I'm going to get to your point earlier on about tasks. I've got a happy update for you on that. But tasks, notes, email, calendar, if you will, most people call it the AI assistant. We think of it as broader than that, as a personal AI. All these things have to come together. And now Messenger, these are what we call the fundamental tools. There are more coming down the pipe, but they have to be in one place, so that now we can look at Peter's life and say, we see what he's doing. We see that he's on Apple. Dan, you could be on Microsoft, and I could be on Google. The user does not care about single sign-on or what they're on. So we want to be able to take the calendar from all three ecosystems, and then your emails from all ecosystems, and then bring in all of that data. If we can get access to all your contacts, now you can have a pretty amazing experience in Messenger. So the idea was, bring everything together and then allow AI to work underneath. So instead of AI being something that doesn't really understand the application, and what it's doing is just analyzing an output from you and then giving you an answer, AI is living inside the tool. It's literally analyzing all the time, and it's looking at your behaviors, which, by the way, is a nod to agents and a nod to how we will get new data, not synthetic data, and learn more about our own personal experiences. This is a big deal. It was mind-blowing to me. A one-stop shop, something I knew a lot about. I'd created a few over the past many or several years, and longer than that. And to be able to not worry about platforms, so we built the services from the ground up. It took a fair bit of time. We've taken a couple of years to bring this together into a mature product, and now we're releasing twice a week. So the innovations are paying off. So now I realize that we can reinvent these different services, and you can personalize your AI. And by doing that, we think we can have more meaningful discussions with the assistant itself. We call it Warp, is the assistant. And we can save you time. To your question about how do you save that time? Well, AI isn't the answer, but AI with these tools is a structured answer, where a house, you can walk in and see everything you need to see. Whereas you can't actually do that in AI today for the everyday person. So if you look at a language model, any of them, GPT, you're just at the prompt line. If you've paid for a package, you might have memorized some of your history, and it will memorize some of your conversations. But for the curious people, 50% of what's in their history doesn't tell them anything about who they are. It's just they're curious about something that they want to query the language on, like a Google search. So now we believe that, and the reason I founded the product was that by having the power of all these tools together, we would have a better understanding of your life and greater context to answer questions that you want. So that even if you're just using email, an example, I think it's on Friday, we come out with yet another big feature to email called priorities. Every time I look at priorities on Apple as an example that come up first of all, they're not that useful. Most of the time we just glide over them. And there's a reason for it. And that's that it's not specific to your life. It's specific to the total aggregate users on the platform, much like the LLMs. They cannot get to that degree of specificity. So now we've got one that says, hey, Ron's chased you 3 times this week. You've got 1 bill outstanding and a decision is required from you today. And 3 of your preferred contacts are chasing you. Now all of a sudden I say to myself, well, I've only got 10 minutes today to look at email. And under every priority is already a drafted email. Like this.
Well, in some ways, it keeps you from making mistakes too. You know, the stuff that never fall through the cracks, the bill doesn't get paid, the phone call that didn't get returned.
Yeah. It definitely takes away kind of the human error element, particularly the gliding effect of just, I'll get back to that later. This forces you to focus. And it says, look, maybe you don't care about it, you can get rid of it, but you will focus on the right things. And more importantly, it's already drafted a response. And we actually think there's gold at the end of the rainbow for someone that masters the reply assistant. And we're ahead of the game here, and we've got much work that we still want to do. But the idea you can come in and it really understand what you've said. So let's say I'm talking to Dan and we've had 8 emails before the last 4 months. It will go and look at those 8 emails, then look at what Dan said to me, and then boom, it will give you a reply that's contextually aware to what we've said in terms of our history and what's being asked of me of the email. These are what we call still micro efficiencies. And we in the productivity world, we consider this a kind of an estimated time saved or an ETS. So we're constantly measuring in the background. We're going to make it public. Just how do you aggregate all of these little simplifications of time saving? And there are many.
Yeah. Sure. So I do know that you support multiple email systems. You've said it, but also on the site, you can sign up for different pricing tiers and have like support for one system or 3 or more than that. So I'm speaking from my own experience, but also if I look at the average person typically has 2 emails, right? They have a personal email and a work email. Sometimes people only have 1 email, depending on how old they are or whatever. What is it's a AOL? Yeah, or AOL. That's you're going way back there, Peter.
Remember this one.
So there are actually 2 different types of personalities though, right? Because if you're dealing with your home email, your personal email, the contacts are different, the context is different, and how often you check is different. Or maybe not, but more spam versus work, where I'm actually wearing personally multiple hats. It's not just one work hat. So I'm getting like emails from PR people and lots of spam and email from systems around, like Google Cloud is down or whatever like that. So like, how is WarpSpeed learning about that and being able to understand what is important based on those roles? And if I want to have everything combined?
Yeah. So that's a great question. It's a broad question because it has, I think, 3 very different answers, but answer you fully. So I'll give you the 3, and I'm going to work backwards. First of all, the best way to attack the email is to understand that inboxes exist for a reason, right? That we don't want to eradicate the fact that you've got 7 emails over 3 different platforms. And by the way, we're going to give deference to a certain platform. No, what we do is we say that, look, every email, it has equal priority. It's all important. And therefore, if you want to go through your emails, you must still have access to your inboxes and look at what we'd call that all inbox, right? Where you've got that aggregate view. What we make simple is the ability to bring all those in. And we've also found, our head of engineering probably will kill me for this, but I think it's out Monday, Tuesday, where, you can bundle, say, Google. So instead of doing a calendar contacts and then email separately, one button, you do them all. And so now, instead of taking a minute or two to do 3 different platforms, you're taking seconds to do each platform. But once they're on, the service is designed to be able to bring all of that email into our intelligence. So we're looking at that, and then we're running our own algorithms and understanding what is the context or the scene in which you're operating in. So it becomes very obvious if you spend 3 days going to work and you spend 2 days working from home. It becomes very obvious what's a work email and what's a personal email. And those are really interesting insights. And it's led us to something else in the roadmap, and that's this concept of views. Not like Apple, where you drag your desktop, your spaces all around, but this concept of what you're saying, Dan, that you maybe I don't just want to wear multiple hats as an entrepreneur, but I want a separate view to see my work, even if the work creeps into my personal space. There is not a person on this planet that doesn't have an email that doesn't have personal and work in it, vice versa, right? So the idea is how do we extract things that are work or, let's say, small business related? Because I'll tell you this, that most personal productivity ideas span into small business because they're productivity, right? Because we are, it's not so much that we're homogenous, it's the fact that we are the same being and that we're pulled into different things, and we'll have conversations that are both personal and work. So our tools ultimately are a conjuring of all of that together. So this concept of views is very interesting to us because it doesn't matter about what email or whether you've told us you're at work or you're at home and you're talking about your life, but we'll give you a view where you'll say, look, here's a set of work decisions that you've got to make. And maybe here's the time frame that you should make them in. Today, certainly in the next, so it's on our development environment and we're about to approve it, we can look at and say, here's all your priorities and here's the decisions. Most decisions are likely to be a bill that's paid for a holiday, or it's going to be someone in work that's chasing you for something and it's crept into one of your emails. That is about to get really smart. That's super smart, to the point where we can separate these views and then still draft replies and prioritize your time even more. And that is the excitement of personal productivity, that we can get to that degree of specificity. And if I may, and I won't do it right now, I'll let this is your call, you lead away, but we're going to get to training your assistant and how that further enhances the answer that I'm going to give you, which is huge.
Yeah, no, I want to go there. But what occurs to me is I had lunch in New York a few weeks ago with a close friend who is the chief AI officer for all of Logitech. And while we were at lunch, he said, oh, I've been out of the office for 3 hours. He created, Dan, you probably correct me, an MCP where he went into, on his phone, he called his assistant and said, hey, summarize everything that's come in my email, my Slack, and my calendar in the last 3 hours. And it did. And I thought, wow, this is like magic. It's brilliant. I realized there's no way in hell I could do that myself.
No.
It's like,
No.
no, so for me, that's actually what's interesting about the promise of warp speed is that, you guys will create that layer, that super layer on top of all the various apps I live in and synthesize it. So that's why I thought warp speed is very, very interesting, because it does solve that big problem of integrating all the data.
Can I reply to that?
Of course.
Okay. Well, I just think there's a couple of interesting points. So we're all over MCP. And obviously the promise of this is not a full integration. So as a technology, I love that. If I don't have to lift my hands to do too much labor, and then I can get consistent, reliable responses from servers, this is a good thing for everyone. I think the challenge is that MCP in its current form is likely to evolve. This is a good thing. And not everyone has MCP servers. The thing that's even probably more problematic in and of itself is that we can't always get the type of data we want. So let's just use a wild example like Uber and say, that where's the cutoff between the way warpspeed will say, look, can you check the traffic? At the same time, can you check what kind of cars are available and what's the time? You get to a point where the traffic's really interesting because you can get better traffic updates than Uber or Lyft or one of those, but let's use Uber. But the challenge is, when do you come out of this product? Because really you've got to go into Uber because it's just easier to make that booking. There are other platforms. And so, but MCP can only take you so far, even if they want to operate an MCP environment. But there are better examples where we can do an MCP type of transfer, so between the MCP server, that adds enormous value to what warpspeed can capture. The problem is, the best way to go about getting that data is to be able to create these agents, which is what for the moment, we do this in the back end. So we're going to show you, hopefully today, a few examples of what you can do without even knowing you're doing it, and it's running agents all the time. And the promise of where that's going is if you trust it with more details, banking is an example, then there is no doubt that it can offer an enormous productivity leap in a concept we call FTR, future time reclaimed. So now we're not looking at the past. We're saying if we use MCP or other related technologies to do what we'd call in the old days integrations to third-party products, the idea is how does Martin replicate himself 10 times, right? That means I'm getting 1,000% productivity. Well, I've got to go and dream up all the things that I think are coming in the next week, 2-3 weeks. And the goal for warp speed, and this is already in the lab, and and I guess you'll sense the excitement blowing me away in as much that we can already today do this with no technology understanding. And we think this is the next big leap for us, rather than say, hey, Dan, can you go and use OpenClaw? And by the way, we've got this other tool that we've got, link them all together. All of a sudden, you'll be falling asleep unless you really love staying up at night, plugging all this together. It needs application. And don't believe the LLM guys that tell you, or applications, or Elon saying, well, soon you won't even need a device or screen. It doesn't even make bloody sense, right? It's a bit like data centers in space. At least I can visualize what that might look like. No, just like email, we're going to be with applications for decades because we still need a device. It's not happening inside our mind. And so the challenge becomes, how do we dream up an idea? So training assistant uses voice. We love voice. We think voice is still got lots of run in its evolution. And then you talk to it, create an action. And my mother, who's 79, can simply say, hey, I want to go to Italy. I'm thinking of going in June. I'm not sure if my two sons want to go. Can you reach out to them and ask them? This is my budget. I'm going to make a decision in a week, and go on and on and on. And then they say, how often do you want to run this? Is it a one-off? Is it daily? Is it weekly? And it's endless. You want to sell your BMW car? What's the mileage? Okay, I'm going to contact the dealer and I'll set up a telephone call. By the way, these are examples that we're using. Or another one we've got, and this will blow you away. My teams in different companies, I'm not a big fan. They all know it, but I agree with it, that they get to work at home and they get to come to the office. And for now, this balance achieves a good level of productivity. I don't know what the end is. I just know that big companies want everyone back in the offices. And I think we've got a happy medium. But it knows that Monday and Friday, people work at home, and it knows Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday that they're in the office. So therefore, it will literally check every day what your traffic like is en route. It knows you use TrainLink, or it knows that you drive, or it knows that you take an Uber. It will literally wake you up early on your alarm, on your Apple iPhone, to say, I'm sorry I woke you up, but there's more traffic on your route. It's going to take you an additional 30 minutes, and here's your new route. And by the way, we've made this booking. Now, the booking bit is because we've trusted it with our banking details. This is blow you away because we have to sleep, but the system doesn't. So these agents, you can dream up what you want. And the moral of the story is, how does anyone, irrespective of where they come from or their age, be able to dream up these actions that we call today agents and achieve this rapid productivity? And for that, you need something like warp speed, and you need an application that can ultimately give you this wonderful marketplace concept where you can see all your dreams coming to life as activities that are running all the time. And this isn't around the corner. It's actually here today, and it's here in its simplest form.
I love that. We're talking about MCP. Just to be clear, I feel like there's probably a lot of people that don't know what MCP is, Model Context Protocol. And just to provide a really quick definition for those that are watching or listening, that allows AI, LLMs, etc., to connect to outside services like your email or any other application you might use, and transfer data back and forth so that the AI can utilize it in some way. I like to think of this as like, if you are on a train, or you have a train and you want to go from your home to the city, and you are literally laying down the track yourself. That is what you need to do when you're talking about MCP, because there are some tracks already built that you can connect to through cloud or AI, but most of them that you personally want to use, you're going to have to build yourself in some way. And that's kind of like vibe code or whatever like that. That's going to go over most people's heads, and most people don't want to deal with it.
It's like, I know what it is. I know what it's supposed to look like, but I'd much rather Martin build it in warp speed than me have to figure out how to do it myself.
I I think that's a great. I thought that was a great analogy, by the way. And for those that are a bit like us, like tech junkies, right? The problem is that we move into that arena, and that is, I hope today I'm explaining that it's not what we ask of our users, right? It is that we will take what MCP is pretty simple in its concept, but to take it away completely so that you just come on and everything you see is really intuitive and easy to use. And you're one click away from actually making a difference with your experience. And if we achieve that, then and we can give you greater reach in terms of what you can do. By the way, we think of warp speed as a bit like we've got this space concept in our branding or whatever, but we think of it like the sun, and we think of the applications as being nearby planets. And the further away the planet is the level of integration that we're willing to go and do. And what's interesting is the way we've architected it is to take advantage of MCP and other compressible APIs, something that we're pioneering, another part of my inventor world. We don't like the way APIs are configured, the amount of time we spend on them, but we know that world is not done with yet. So how do we go and build these really solid integrations? Go and look at GPT. Behind the scenes is 200 application integrations. Now, unfortunately, we're going to be living with some of this clunky old form of technology in order to get to the new world.
Yeah, the beautiful thing about AI, in my opinion, AI is still so controversial, but the end game is that it makes our lives better, simpler. Right now, it's not always that. And, you talk about even just prompt engineering. A year ago, they're talking about prompt engineering going away and people typing. Well, now there's a lot of people at the forefront of AI that are just using voice. They're not typing. They're just telling the models what they want to do, or they're telling their tools what they want to do, and it's interpreting it. Where you're going with warp speed, I feel, is ideally that next phase of AI for the general consumer, which is they don't know how the track is made. They don't care how the track is made. They just want to get on the train and they want to go where they're going. And it's exactly that's the success of it and the failure. If you can't do that, then your product isn't going to succeed. And I'm not talking about warp speed in general. I'm talking in general when people are trying to get into the AI game, it has to be simplified.
That's the conundrum, and you're absolutely right. And this is where I had this whole thing about visions, and I've taught a whole idea lab on visions, and I think it's an I think everyone has a different view of what that is, but I think we can all commonly agree that when we set out a vision, we have to be 2 or 3 magnitudes ahead with our thinking. This is the bottom line. And the most important thing is that if you were to take the sum aggregate of 4 billion parts in an LLM and look at what the sum of human knowledge is, the only mathematical way to stay ahead is to understand that something in that algorithm hasn't been thought about yet, and that you've figured out what that time available is to you in order to build something. In our example, it was to say, how do we get rid of monolithic applications like Evernote? I don't want to get rid of them, but how do we take our own path and say that this is not going to be about one tool? Because actually, if we are going to get to some form of AGI, I don't want to make this an AGI conversation, but another big foxhole. But if we're going to get there, it isn't going to come from what we've learned about the past, because the sum of total human knowledge is already available and already contextual. So not that interesting to us. This is why agents, and you'll hear Demis and other people talk about it, the agents do one thing. They give us behavior data. So in our little world of warp speed, which is growing, it's very simple. The more you help us personalize what you want from Warp, our personal AI, the more you will get a more trusted and personal experience from the daily productivity you get. But what behind it sits is then from that productivity, the system's learning and it's suggesting what everyone is leaning towards in terms of its behavior. It's evolving the way you want to live your life. And even if you don't like that, so here's the simple circle. We think of a CIP, or continuous improvement cycle, right? Where you go, personalization, you use voice and you talk to your assistant and you tell it specifically about your life. I've got an example for you. Hopefully we can run it. After that, you start using email and all those tools. Then after it, you personalize it again. It's adding the learnings of what everyone's doing. And if you don't like it, you say, I don't like that. Go back to this way of reviewing my answers. I actually only want 2 sentences and I want to arrive at the decision in the fastest way possible and nothing else. But it may have found that other users want to do something different. So we believe that personalization and productivity, without getting into the technology itself, is the way that you can get the best productivity or outcome for yourself. And we want you to be in control of that because you'll trust it a lot more.
Martin, did you say you wanted to show like a demo or something?
And we show you a couple of things, yeah, if you like. This is Messenger. So there's a real conversation happening between Eugene, okay, and what you'll find is interesting is that he's asking about this, hotels for a Madrid conference, and the whole purpose of what Warp can do is it's focused on the contextual conversation inside the chat. So you can write whatever you want, and you can be as verbose as you want or as accurate as you want. So it will look at the assistant and say, look, here's what I want to say, and now all of a sudden, Warp, it's going to say at Warp, and bring the AI assistant that's already in your conversation, and it'll give it an instruction to be the third person in the conversation. So in this example, it will say, look, can you find me some 5-star hotels? Now, what normally happens is you have a conversation, it's a bit long, you go away, you Google, you may not actually get to say, hey, I'll come back to you with that information. You cannot imagine the speed of a very succinct AI that's in the conversation. And as more people go into it, let's say you're in a group chat, it becomes much, much more productive. So here it takes into consideration what's happened. Now, what you'll find is it's endless. If there's 4 or 5 people and there's let's say 4 people that made a decision earlier on in the chat, it's memorizing everything that's happening in the conversation. And as you ask it a question, it's taking everyone's viewpoint into consideration. And this is powerful. So we'll wait for it right now to give an answer. We'll come back with an answer in a second.
So while we wait real quick, where is this chat happening? Is it happening inside of warpspeed? And what chat is this? Is it text message?
Yeah. So I noticed there was a pause here just so I can answer that question. Well, thank you, Samuel. So yes. So warpspeed has 8 services. One of them is its own messenger. Okay. And we decided that audio, and not saying we won't do it in the future, but audio and FaceTime, this is a commodity. But we wanted to focus on the quality of the conversation itself. So given we have this really high degree of personalization, how could we show you that Warp is constantly available to you wherever you are? So if you're in a Messenger, you can ask Warp to fact check, get you information, get you quotes, contact other people, bring other people in the conversation. I can say, Dan sent me an email. I think it was 4 months ago. There's a roadmap presentation in there. Grab it, and it will come and bring it to the conversation. And you never have to come back. If you keep coming back to texts, it's the biggest disruption. Well, for me, it is. It's in the top 3 biggest disruptions to your daily flow. So we constantly go back and forward. What does this person want from me? How long are we going to have a conversation? I'm done with the small updates. In work, it becomes even more frustrating. So the idea here is if you've got 1, 2 people, can we get the right people on the chat and then share all the information and brainstorm? And to do that, we need access to Peter's tools, your tools, my tools, and then AI will do the rest. And we'll finish and play it here. And what's happened is that it comes back and says, look, we found the price. It's already in your budget. It can go and check exact rates. And do you know what? It says, if you're okay with that, I'll go and add it to your calendar. And it can do many other things. So now we've got this. It's not a mini productivity session because all these things are stacking up minutes into tens of minutes. And then you've got the if you will, the refocusing of letting go of the conversation and then coming back to it. By the way, on StreamYard, this is working really well. This actually has got no latency in it at all.
So this is Messenger within Warp, correct? This is not AOL Messenger or Facebook Messenger or
no. This is Messenger inside Warp. So built from the ground up. So that obviously, and what we love about it is if you use Telegram or WhatsApp or any of those, is we just don't understand the way they're applying AI. We think that most people don't use it, and the reason we know that is 55 people we don't use it. We just don't understand it. Here, you'll always want to use Warp because it instantly gives you context, and you'll see this little word "show more." What it's designed is to give you a really punchy chat answer that's a closed loop answer that addressed your point. You can then click on show more and it will give you a contextual answer that is broader. So,
which means that Dan and I both need to be in warp speed using this messenger function, right?
This is true. Yeah. So I'm not saying you will replace it, but one day we hope you will. The idea is that you don't need all these different chat apps like Telegram or WhatsApp or I don't know, WeChat. There's a whole bunch of Viber. The whole purpose here is that we think that chat is an extension of your everyday communication, and that it needs to be in one place. And so if we've got access to all your tools and all your email, then you'll want to use this. You can't today go and get a conversation going and then grab an attachment, summarize the attachment, email that attachment, all from one chat. That is really powerful. And to do that, you need to have it in one place. So here it says, I've just confirmed your appointment. You've got your free for 30 minutes. It's done all of that check. The whole team know they can do it. And I just say, let's go. If all of us were debating it, it would keep asking you the question until it found a time where everyone can work together. So this, whilst this looks like a nice stream of chat conversation, this is saving you tens and tens of minutes. And more importantly, a lot of dead time because you're going back and forward and coming in and out of the conversation. And that's a bit frustrating.
What I like is it actually gets closure. It's like, as opposed to these sort of endless loops of email and text and voicemail, it's like, yeah,
What happens if, like, the people that you do chat with on a regular basis don't have warp speed? Are you still using warp speed personally, and they're seeing the message, but they're just not able to see what warp is saying back, or how does that work?
Yeah, it's the great new app syndrome, right? That you have to convince people to make a choice, and so we're fortunate. I mean, we're right at the beginning of what we call MVP plus, and we have significant well, we're growing faster, but we have significant users where we're measuring one particular metric. How many times do people recommend using warp speed? And there are different onboard ramps. We do the same thing as everyone else, right? That, hey, join warp speed because I've connected with your messenger. Join warp speed because I'm using the calendar there. And all services have different ways to bring the audience onto the platform. The great one for me is that obviously I'm biased because I'm the CEO of the platform, but I use it because I want to use AI inside. I want to use warp inside my chat, just as I want email to become a 5-minute consideration on a day that I'm really busy, and maybe 30 minutes when I'm not busy. I don't want to spend any longer on email on any day of the week. And so the goal is I want to glide through it like a gesture-based system and see very visually what are my emails today, because I've got a moment to think about it. Otherwise, I'm going to let Warp figure out what are my priorities. If you deserve that level of freedom that's platform agnostic, you probably come to warp speed. So we rely on users wanting to bring other users on the platform. For me, I don't use text messenger or iMessage much now, and so people come and find me on warp speed. The minute people give up on the other platforms, they come and join warp speed because they want to communicate with me. So that syndrome is that at some point people have to choose: is it better to have everything in one place? So all of these things are they're endless, right? In terms of you could have had a chat stream that lasted 5 minutes that was 2 hours of work, right? Or you could do something in seconds. And so here's another example. We've got people on the platform talking to Warp for over 2 hours a day. Now, I'm not saying that that's overly productive, but they've got this idea. And by the way, Dan, we didn't deal with the payments and
module is at Warp Therapist.
I think that what it is they're developing a relationship, and they're realizing the aha moment is that they're realizing that the minute they say, I don't like crowds, when they use a command at the prompt line, it's recognizing that they don't use crowds. Peter, when we spoke when I was in France, I said that I realized that I'm family first, work second, and I'll always be this way. But I sometimes get so far carried away myself that I don't consider my wife when I need to consider at the right time. So I tell my own assistant, factor in my wife to everything I do. And it reminds me all the time, this might have an impact. Some of it I'm like, no, I've got a way around that. And other times it doesn't. And so we're going to go to Train Your Assistant. It's another service. This is the only one in the world. This is what we've done. Let's just say this, this is a demo to show you. Although it looks a lot like me, intellectually dislikes flying. That is me. Crowded places. All right. So there's a bunch of stuff in there where you can talk directly to the language model, which is the one that we own. This is what we call a customer preference model. So you can just talk by voice. It doesn't matter how long you take, and it will essentially summarize what you're saying, and it will create a set of preferences, your likes, your dislikes, what your personality profile is. And what's interesting is it's free from bias. So it doesn't have it won't prioritize your response from a language model. It will prioritize your own preferences first. And this is why people are getting addicted to it. They're saying, actually, now there's a lot of things I don't want you to waste my time. So what I do is I say, look, I want the decision as fast as possible, and I prefer an answer in 2 sentences. And that is what spawned this thing that says long answer. You can ask for a short answer or a long answer. I like succinct information fast, and I like a lot of it. But not everyone is the same. But in this example, it's now writing something that I've just told it, and you'll see that Train Your Assistant has already understood what it said. And it's given me a very specific answer because it knows who I am. So people realize the more they train, the better it is. And this is that concept of personalization, productivity, further refinement of personalization. And all of a sudden, your language model now doesn't care that it's using Gemini 3.1 or 4.5 GPT. It cares about what you're telling it directly. And this is very powerful because you can actually change the course of history. You can change the way an LLM is responding and design it to specifically work with your biases. I say biases, but the way that we view the lens. This one is really, really profound because it says 2 things about what I care about information when I'm looking at prompts that I'm describing. And if it avoids those, then it doesn't really come out with the right outcome. And so you'll find that if you're going to train your assistant, the more you train it, your warp, your personal AI will not be the same as anyone else's. And this is the benefit. We're now a level lower, so that if we aggregate what everyone's best practices are, we're getting behavioral analysis. And that is the path that people believe, or let's say it's the primary path to potentially AGI. Industries driving specific behavior.
I love this because it's not train once and set and forget. This is continuous improvement, like you were talking about before.
Yep.
But question here is, does it also learn through your interactions through email and the messenger and so forth, or is it specific to going into the training section and updating?
Yeah, thanks for that, Dallas. It learns from everything. So as an example, in Warp AI, which call that the traditional prompt line, it's memorizing all your history. It's a memory layer that is really thorough. If it conflicts with anything you've told in Train Your Assistant, it will ask you. If you train your assistant, it's fine. Let's say that us three were we should do this. This would be a great example. We're going to have a group chat in Messenger. It will not only learn everything that we're talking about in that chat, but it will memorize AI's responses within that chat and then put that into your profile. So the context, it just continues to grow. And it's the same with email. If it will remember your drafts of your email just as quickly as you manually writing an email, it won't just care about the emails coming in. It's looking at, for want of a better word, a bifocal lens. So it looks at what's far away and what's near term. And that's the power of personalization. The interesting thing about it is it's very achievable if you architect the solution right. So the idea is it's information first and it's personalization first, right? These 2 things mean we don't want to drive features for the sake of features at you. We want to make sure that you care about personalization as a pathway to productivity. That means we need to know across all your services.
I feel like I want to come back in another 6 months or a year because I think this will look completely different and better with all the stuff you're going to add.
Oh, yeah.
So let me kind of summarize. The app is warpspeed is in Google Play and the Apple App Store.
Yep.
It is currently useful on an individual basis. It will probably accrue in value as more teammates come on. And if anything, we used to talk about killer apps. And it seems like, if I heard you correctly, that your notion that at Warp is kind of the killer app. That
Yep.
ability to have, at Warp integrated into the conversation is where you really get that leap in productivity.
For sure. And on 10 seconds about tasks and reminders and stuff like that. So we have a task module that is very, very advanced in of itself. But sometimes Apple and these platforms, they prevent you. And this is an old debate that's been happening between Meta as they try to get an advantage. So the reminders section, which is a good task manager for want of better, it's not bad, it's got better, or notes in Apple, they don't allow you to drain the history because they want to keep you on their operating system. And so we found some strong workarounds that give us the same features and give us the same data. So this is an ongoing battle where applications, your Apple will tell you, we want you to have the information if you're responsible with it, but they don't make it easy. So companies like us find ways to make sure that we can make those integrations. Email, calendar, that's easy. That's the easy contacts. That stuff has been given by all the major platforms. When you get to these sub platforms that deserve the same importance, we've got good news that for Apple Notes in particular and tasks in terms of reminder, it's coming to warpspeed. And that is important because of, if it's like you, I've got 26,000 reminders. Now, by the way, I use warpspeed because none of the context is understood. And I'll bet you the new Siri that's coming out isn't going to go anywhere close to giving you the importance of that context or note summarization in a way that is meaningful to us.
Yeah. So, Martin, this has been a hoot. I've enjoyed the conversation. I'm excited to become a better user of Warp Speed. And like I said, I look forward to coming back and revisiting to see kind of where this is in a few more months.
I look forward to it. Been a lot of fun, gentlemen.
All right.
Likewise. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.